What are my top favorite Harry Potter books? Well, stick around if you want to find out. So when I was in middle school, the Harry Potter books were all the rage, and I had recently been on summer break, and one of my cousins was just engrossed in this Harry Potter book the whole time, and I just thought it was the nerdiest thing ever. I mean, here, like on the cover of the book, you can see this guy with his like broken glasses, a scar on his forehead. It looks like a nerd, and he's like playing around with a magic wand. I'm like, oh, it looks so boring. Well, one evening, my mother brought home a book. She had bought me the first Harry Potter book. And I was like, oh, come on. Oh, I don't want to read this. She's like, listen, I want to just read you the first chapter. And if you don't like it, after that, then that's fine. But just sit down and, we got some good food. I still remember what I was eating that night. We went to Arby's and we got this takeout fast food. Well, you know where the story's going. She started reading, and once she got to the end of the chapter, I was like, oh, keep going. What are you doing? And that was the beginning of my foyer. Is that correct? My entrance into the magical world of Harry Potter in the 2000s. The 2000s was such a magical time. Anyway, I love all of the Harry Potter books, but we all have to have a favorite, right? So I'm going to be ranking those. So listen, if you haven't read these yet, just read them in order. Going to be some spoilers ahead. So, go read the books and then come back and then, we can talk. But I always thought it was funny when people would say like, oh yeah, I've read, book 1, 4, and 7. Why? Oh, well, I heard this one was better than that. No. Just read them in order. Because although each book is, contains its own complete story, which is what's kind of nice about these books, you get this whole overarching story arc, which is nice as it unfolds. So it's really hard to sort of separate one book from the rest, but you can, and that's what we're going to be doing today, is we're going to be judging which ones are the best. So here's my methodology. I'm basically going to be giving you my opinion from my personal experience, having read these and reread them at least once each. So I'm going to give you my favorite points on each of these books, and then reasons why maybe they didn't rank number one, or maybe things that I would have liked to have been a little different in the reading experience, which is tough because the author did such an amazing job with all of these. Anyway, let's get ready to start our list. Coming in at number 7 in last place is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone or the Sorcerer's Stone, depending on where you're from. So this was the book that started it all. We have a lot of Harry Potter world building. We get a lot of introduction to a lot of great characters. We're introduced to the magical world, Gringotts, the snacks that they would eat on the train. So we're introduced to things like chocolate frogs, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, all of these parts of the magical world. So it's really fun, and I have a lot of nostalgia for this era. The 2000s was such a magical time thanks to this book, and this whole book series really, but this is the book that started it all. So why is this one number 7, coming in at last place for me? Well, it's just not as fun to reread. I mean, it's the first book, so it's the simplest book. Everything is new to Harry, and he still feels kind of like a foreigner, like an outsider. Nothing in this world is quite normal to Harry yet, and he doesn't really feel, everything feels sort of awkward. He doesn't really feel quite at home in this series just yet. It's also the most simplistic of all of the books. Certainly it is the least complex of all the books, the shortest of all the books, and that's fine. But, when rereading, I really enjoy going for those books that's going to give me the real richness of the world. Oh, I have some notes here in case you see me looking down. And one of the things I have here about this book is the cruelty of the Dursleys seems a little severe, especially on rereads. I remember the first time reading it, I really enjoyed it. It was very funny. It was very, cartoonish, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is just how my dad treats me. Like every kid kind of feels like they're, growing up and having had the experiences that I've had so far in life and having seen the things that I've seen, I don't find it in the least bit amusing anymore, so I don't like rereading that aspect. but you know what? It was a great book. Let's move along to number 6 on my list of the top 7 Harry Potter books. The next one moving down the list at number 6 is The Goblet of Fire. Okay. There were some things that I really liked about this book. For instance, all the drama surrounding the Yule Ball. And I'll always remember the scene of Harry trying to ask out Cho Chang and wondering, okay, why do these girls always travel around in flocks? Like, I could so relate to that, like middle school and high school, that awkward, I love all that awkward drama with the cringy adolescent angst and coming of age and crushes and all of that. And the Triwizard Tournament was cool, but there was a ridiculous amount of stress put on Harry. However, he was able to use that, I think, in a formative way to help develop him moving forward. But upon rereading this book, I had a lot of gripes, and here are some of them. Harry's name gets called out of the Goblet of Fire to participate for Hogwarts in the Triwizard Tournament, even though he's not supposed to, right? He doesn't really want to. He seems sort of indifferent to it. And there seems all this drama with all the teachers. They go in the back room and they're like, oh, how did his name get called? How did this happen? Like, through this whole time, like, if I was Harry, I'd be like, I don't want this. But instead, he's just like, well, okay, I guess you just have to do it. You know, with Dumbledore and everybody, it's like they could have, you know, maybe worked a little harder to make the case or to explain to him why. Harry was just quiet for the whole time. He's just like, all the teachers are there bickering, and he's just like, I don't know. And he goes out into the Great Hall, and everyone's like, oh yeah, Harry, and he's just like, oh, okay. I didn't like that. I think Harry needed to take a more proactive stance and either say, yeah, I want to do this, or no, I don't want this. I'm not doing it. I'm going to just walk out of the school right now. I'm not doing this. I would have liked to seen something like either way, and not just this sort of indifferent reaction. Some of the teachers accusing him, and anyway. And it would have been better for him socially too, because then he could come out and say, yo, folks, I did not, he wouldn't say folks, but you know what I mean. Hey, my friends, I did not, try to do this. And speaking of that, I really don't like Ron's petty and vitriolic jealousy towards the attention upon Harry throughout this whole book, really. Well, he gets over it, but it lasts for like longer than it should. Right? And it like escalates almost to like a physical fight. I didn't like that. And I understand that's one of the flaws in Ron's character, but oh my gosh, I was not very sympathetic to that. And I understand they're young, like they're like whatever, middle school age or whatever. They're adolescents, so they're kind of immature, but I wanted to see a little bit, I wanted to see better from Harry's best friend. Oh, and then there's the issue of like, why does he need, somebody already mentioned this, why does Harry need a permission slip to go to Hogsmeade, right? But he doesn't need a permission slip to participate in this like deadly tournament, potentially deadly tournament? It's like, what about that? The tournament itself, while cool at times, was ridiculously complex. It was like almost impossible to win without cheating, or like getting some advanced, which would have been cheating, getting some advanced knowledge on what the tasks were going to be. So I didn't like how crazy advanced the magic was for a bunch of kids, even if it did help Harry in the long run, because it taught him valuable skills on how to think on your feet and do some research and rely on help from your friends, all those themes that we get that are lovely. But it just seemed like, what are you trying to make these kids do? It'd be one thing if this were a tournament for experienced wizards, but anyway, these were just kids who were still trying to learn how to do this, and they were asked to do spells that they had never heard of. So they really had to rely on the help of teachers and other people to kind of help them out and slip them some, rely on Dobby to slip them some, what was that, gillyweed? Yeah, anyway. Hermione's spew nonsense, right? S-P-E-W, right? I understand it was for comic relief, but I wasn't feeling it. The actual victory of the Triwizard Tournament, by the way, once Harry actually wins, it's kind of a letdown because, well, you know what happened at the end of the tournament. Okay, and then the whole business with the Mad Eye Moody switcheroo. I didn't really care for that plot device, that little plot twist or whatever was going on there, because it really felt like Harry was connecting with this guy for this whole book, and then he ends up being somebody, when he ends up finally meeting the real Mad Eye Moody, it's just awkward. And here you are, you spent the whole year with somebody who wasn't who you thought they were. But it's kind of messes with your mind, wouldn't it? I didn't like that. There's a lot in this book with people getting messed with, but that's another level. Okay, so that was number 6. Moving along down the list, very slowly, I'm afraid. Let's try to speed this up a little. Number 5, The Prisoner of Azkaban. So I loved seeing Hogsmeade, even if Harry had to sort of sneak out to get there. I liked the Marauders map, the night bus, Harry getting a little independence after kind of running away from home or however that worked. I liked the scene with the Dementors on the train. I liked his relationship with Professor Lupin. I think that was really great. I hated Crookshanks. What was that all about? That was a really oddly done scene because wasn't it like Hermione came out of this shop and she just had like Crookshanks in her arm and nobody like asked her like, why'd you do that? What's with the cat? It almost seemed a little out of character just when she actually bought it, because wasn't she just reprimanding them about how they shouldn't buy a pet, or they shouldn't do some sort of impulse buy? Anyway, so we know this whole book, The Prisoner of Azkaban, is about Sirius Black. What kind of bothers me about this is that nobody ever bothered to prepare Harry in any way to say, hey, sometimes newspapers exaggerate things. Or, hey, sometimes we have a prejudice against people that are behind bars. I don't know, something that could have, did they all think that Sirius Black was totally evil and totally guilty like the whole time? I don't think that was the case, right? Like, didn't Dumbledore know? Anyway, this whole time, there was not even a hint that Sirius might be a good guy, such to the point when Harry actually, confronts him, he doesn't believe him. He's just, everyone around him, every single person says, no, you're evil, you're bad, you're involved with killing my parents. And it took a little while for that to come out, longer than I wish that it should have, because it was like 2 whole chapters of them just sitting there talking to each other. That's another thing I didn't like. When you are doing a movie, I know that I'm not comparing any of this to the movie, but when you're doing a movie, you're writing a script, they always say, well, show, don't tell. It's the same thing when you're writing a novel, right? You want people to be able to have the experience and don't just talk about it. Do you know what I'm saying? So they remedied this in future books when they introduced the Pensieve, so that, Dumbledore could share the memory and not just sit there for 2 chapters saying, let me tell you, this is what happened, and then this is what happened, and then this is what happened. No, he shows them so that he brings Harry's actually there. But that didn't happen in this book when Sirius had to really... So I just kind of wish there was some other literary device or some other way to sort of show or explain what happened, what really happened, rather than just to have Harry and Sirius saying, no, listen, let me tell you the whole story, and then it just goes on for 2 chapters. Still important stuff, but could she have found another way to have done that? I think so. Okay, I didn't care for the Buckbeak saga. It just didn't do much for me. And then the Time Turner. So a lot of people really like this device, but for me, it just seemed, especially on rereading. So the first time you read through, it's fine, you don't really know what's going on, but the second time you read the book, you can see it coming from a mile away, and it's fine because you already read it, so you know what's going to happen. But all of these, I want to tell you my impression on the Time Turner. I think that J.K. Rowling wrote her book, Prisoner of Azkaban. This is my theory, okay? So you get a little Potter theory here, okay? From the Media Keeper. I think that J.K. Rowling wrote her book, The Prisoner of Azkaban, start to finish, and there was no time turner. And I think that somebody looked at it, or maybe she looked at it again, or a publisher or something. They said it needs something else. It needs a twist. It needs something, more, extra special or something in there. And so she comes up with this, oh, well, gee, what if I do this time turner? Okay, and then I can go into 5 different places earlier on in the book, which she did, and just had them just randomly say, oh, how can Hermione be in so many places at once? And then a couple chapters later, oh gee, I wonder how come Hermione's in our class but she's in another class at the same time? And then a couple it's like she inserted these little conversations in there to sort of set up what was coming. I could be wrong in how that worked, but that's kind of how it plays out. It plays out as if she's like, yeah, I'm going to add this time turner business, and then we'll just go back and we'll kind of do some foreshadowing, right? So that's just my opinion. That's my perspective. That's how it reads. That's how it feels to me as someone who's done some creative writing myself and tries to sometimes switch things up and try to sneak some things in. That's what it felt like to me. Not to mention, people have already said before, giving the time turner to a third year at Hogwarts Hermione. I know she's responsible, but they couldn't use the time turner for something more important, Dumbledore dying, and we could use the time turner and save him, bring him back. No, can't do that. But if this third-year girl's got to go and do 2 classes at the same time, then it's okay. The time turner doesn't hold up very well to rereads, is what I'm trying to say. Did I mention I love all these books? I'm just getting a little passionate here. I like to keep the energy up. And as long as the energy is up, let's go to the next book on our list. Right coming in at the middle of our list, in the number 4 position, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. So one thing that I really like about this book that sort of sticks out in my memory is seeing more of Tom Riddle's youth through the Pensieve. And it really reminds me of the flashback scenes in the book and the film The Medusa Touch. This is a film that I saw some years later, and it's based on a book of the same name. And it involves a guy who, when he was a kid, he realized he could make things happen. Sort of like that quote from Tom Riddle, "I can make bad things happen to people who annoy me." And when I saw that film, The Medusa Touch, which is a British film, by the way, it really made me wonder, okay, is this something that J.K. Rowling saw at some point, or a book that she read that maybe inspired her in how she wrote the young Tom Riddle character and his origin story? I liked all the moments with Dumbledore in this book and the romantic developments as well. And this book contains one of my favorite scenes in all of the Harry Potter books, which is when they're in Hogsmeade and they're about to leave, and Harry's thoughts stray over to Ginny and Dean in Madame Puddifoot's tea shop before he's rudely snapped out of his daydreams to seeing Angela Bell with, the curse or whatever was it Angela Bell? Anyway, it seemed like a very real moment, and that's the type of moment that can really make you realize that you're in love with someone. What I didn't like about this book, The Half-Blood Prince, is the extended prologue scene with the ministers and then Snape and Bellatrix. By the way, Bellatrix is a star in, I think it's the Orion constellation. Anyway, there was a lot of characters named after stars. Sirius is also a star. I didn't like the graphic and gratuitous violence, like with Malfoy on the train. I get it. He's an evil, violent character, but you could kill someone just stomping on someone's head like that. I don't like that. I didn't like that. And then after that, Snape goes and just kind of catches him outside the castle trying to get in, and he's like, "Oh, you're late. 50 points from Gryffindor," or something like this. And it's like, well, yeah, late because one of your students just assaulted me. Why don't you do something about that? So one of the things that I didn't like about this book was Harry's lack of effort with Snape. There are so many times and so many opportunities where I would have just gone into Snape's office or classroom or whatever and just be like, do you hate me? can we like talk about that? Can we work something out? I mean, I don't expect it to be perfect, but come on, make some effort. I used to, I won't say suck up to teachers, but I used to try to build relationships with teachers. And if there was something wrong, trust me, there were a lot of teachers that hated me. But there were very few teachers that I didn't at least try with. Anyway, no, there were definitely teachers that hated me. There were. But I would at least try to have a sense of humor with them, and none of that with Harry. Look, I get it. The guy insulted your dead father and all that, and he's holding a grudge. But like, address that, and maybe say, well, gee, Mr. Snape, you are, sort of punishing me for the sins of that you perceive of my father, because you think that I'm just like him, and instead, like, no, you should be going after Draco. Draco Malfoy is the one who's like the bully. I wouldn't just sort of take it like Harry just kind of grumbled, oh, okay, detention, I'm just going to do this detention. No, I mean, come on. You got to try to reach people. You got to think. Dumbledore trusts him. Why? There must be a reason. So I didn't like the lack of effort that he seemed to put forth with Snape, with trying to patch things up. Like, yeah, dude, I know I saw like some embarrassing stuff of my father bullying you. I was horrified to see that. I feel terrible about that, but I wouldn't have done that to you. It would have been nice to see a little conversation trying, because in the whole series they never even like mended things up. Like, this was the chance to even talk and try to figure out where's Snape coming from. Like, do you literally just hate me? It would have been nice to have something, but that wasn't the dynamic. Anyway, I maybe I'm asking too much of Harry. Harry is quick to anger in this book and in a few of these books, and a bit impulsive, so maybe that's a character flaw of Harry there. And although this book has some really great, strong moments with the Harry and Ginny story arc, which is great, to be honest, I found Ginny to be a bit snotty in this book, especially early on. And I know that the author's trying to probably paint a contrast between Ginny in the first book that she appeared in, and, now book 6 we're at Half-Blood Prince. And so we want to see maybe a bit of a change, that she's grown as a character, changed or developed, whatever. But there were too many scenes where she was unkind for my liking, and I think they pushed it a bit far in this book, just for the sake of maybe contrast or whatever they were trying to portray. I know she's bold, I know she's brave, I know she's a bit crass, and being brought up with a family full of brothers and no sisters, she has this really kind of, fire and spark to her personality. But there were some moments when she was just nasty, and I found it a bit off-putting. Moving along, now we're getting to some of the real good stuff. Coming in at number 3 on my list is The Deathly Hallows. Okay, I can't talk enough on this book, but I will try to. So this was a really strong entry into the series, and really a strong finish, being the last book in the series. A lot of people didn't like the camping scenes. I did. I really enjoyed them a lot. I mean, here's what I think is going on. I think the people who don't like the camping scenes are the people who read the book in 24 hours. That's my theory. Let me know in the comments if you think that that's wrong. But I took months to read this book, and I savored every moment. It did not feel like the camping scenes were dragging out. I wanted them to continue, and upon rereading, I'm like, oh, geez, I remember the camping scenes being a lot longer, and they really weren't. It's I don't know how many chapters there are, but there's a lot that happens in this book. But the sense of dread that builds up when they're just listening to every twig snapping around them, not knowing if there's somebody out there. The relationships straining, everybody getting tired of each other and being cramped in the tent for a while. Like, that's real stuff. Like, you felt like you're there. But they knew they had to move forward. They knew what their mission was. And that's another thing that I liked about this book. It's very mission-based. It's very focused on solving this mystery of the Deathly Hallows. So they know what they have to do, and sometimes they don't know how to do it, obviously, but they know what they have to do, and the book is about figuring out how to do that and talking to who they need to talk to, going to different places, and so much happens in this book. We cover so much ground. We go to Gringotts, we go to Hogsmeade, we're in Grimmauld Place, we're in Muggle towns, like trying to go in the cafe and then using you-know-whose name, and then, they all find out because there's, what was it, a tracer or something put on whoever uses that name. Christmas Eve at Godric's Hollow was one of my favorite scenes in the whole series. When Harry goes to visit the grave of his mother and there's just snow slowly falling around and it's almost midnight and the lights are on from the church and you can hear carols being sung and the night is still and they realize, oh my gosh, it's Christmas Eve. That was such a powerful moment. And I liked the epilogue too. A lot of people didn't like the epilogue, but it needed something. And it was just satisfying, it was fulfilling, it tied everything together. And the scene with Dumbledore where he was finally able to ask him some questions was memorable. So a really, really strong entry. I really like a lot about this book, and it's very hard placing it at number 3 out of 7, ranking them. It was a very tough choice to put it where I put it, but it's not without its flaws either. So the wedding was lame, and I think it lasted too long. I think a lot of people have talked about the wedding scene kind of being a little unnecessary. When Lupin came to Grimmauld Place, I kind of wish that they weren't so nasty to each other at that point where they really should have been trying to express their help and support for one another, but they really are such different characters. That was a tough scene to read. And then the whole episode with Bathilda, I wouldn't have gone alone with her and the other. I mean, come on, what was Harry thinking? And Hermione too. I mean, I know that Hermione wanted to trust Harry, and come on, you can't let him go and do that alone. There's no reason for him to go alone in a room on a separate floor with. I mean, it was a scary scene, but I don't like to see my favorite characters doing stupid things I know part of this book is about having confidence and trusting your intuition, because sometimes you don't know what you're doing and you just have to kind of fly by the seat of your pants. That was not a good move, though, to go. And this is like, the horror movie where they say, don't go into that room. And the character keeps going into that room. And it's like, yeah, I told you. So that was a little frustrating. Okay, and maybe this is why people didn't like the camping scenes. Ron leaving Harry and Hermione. That was rough. I know that the Horcrux was getting to him and everything, but for a best friend, we're still going through this with this jealousy thing, that was rough. Is it forgivable? I think so, but that was rough. One of the main points of this book was to go around and find all the Horcruxes and destroy whatever. It would have been really helpful to have a running ledger on how many Horcruxes have been found so far and destroyed, and how many do we need to find? They didn't really do too many recaps, if any, from what I'm recalling from reading this book. I do remember being a bit confused with being like, how many are there now? How many did they get? How many do they have to? They got to get it by midnight, and there's still freaking 3 left? There was a lot that was up to luck. Ron and Hermione went and they destroyed one without even telling him where they were going, and I don't know. I mean, great. I'm glad that he had a lot of friends that were able to help him. That was lovely. But because this was the last book, there was a lot that needed to be sort of crammed in. There were a lot of loose ends that needed to be tied up and explained. So the ending especially, well, I don't know, I want to say the third act of the book, started to seem a bit rushed, a bit chaotic. There were some very satisfying moments, but there were some moments where there was so much going on at once that it was a bit hard to follow. And finally, the finality of this book, knowing that this is the last book in the series and that there's no more to come, it's a little bittersweet. So that's why this book is number 3 and not number 2, because number 2 on my list is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This is a great book. I really enjoy this book. It has some really dark moments, some very serious moments, but also a lot of funny moments. I love the summer at the Burrow, where it was the first time that Harry really felt like he had a family, and not just, a family at school, but like a home that he could go to that, at the Burrow with the Weasleys. And that's where we get our intro to Ginny, who I thought was a fabulous character in this book. Certainly not as snotty, certainly not as snotty as she was in the, what was the other one? Prince of, Half-Blood Prince. I like the flying car and the way that that scene was written. It's really beautiful. Again, if you are one of those people who, oh, I read this book in 7 hours. Okay, well, then maybe you didn't enjoy. This book has such beautiful writing. And I almost said beautiful lighting, because she really talks about the light, the color of the light in the sky when they're in the flying car in Dumbledore's office, when Harry's going through the diary and seeing Tom Riddle back in the day in the headmaster's office. And she talks about the color of the intensity of the lighting in the window as the sun is setting or something like that. It's very, very beautiful, beautiful writing, and it really takes you there. I like the interaction and development of all the characters in Diagon Alley as we meet Lucius and the Malfoys with the Weasleys and Lockhart. Lockhart was a very funny character. I know a lot of people can't stand him, but I used to like to laugh at my teachers. I sound horrible for saying that, but you know, you have to have some entertainment. You have to be in. This guy was like putting curlers in his hair, and he had pictures of himself all around the place, and he was giving his autograph to everybody. He was so full of himself. It was fun. He was a funny character to read, and so pompous, and everything that Snape thought that Harry was. It was really. He's a funny character to read, I thought. I enjoyed that. The Death Day party with Nearly Headless Nick, and all the dark stuff, the history of Hogwarts, you know, the modern history, but also, you know, the talk about the ancient history of the castle. We get all of that in Chamber of Secrets. Very, very important book for the history of Hogwarts. We talked about the glimpses of Riddle's boyhood, also the Polyjuice potion over Christmas break, you know, with Harry and Ron turning into Crabbe and Goyle, and that was a fun scene. And of course, Harry saving Ginny in the end, and Fawkes the Phoenix. Loved Fawkes the Phoenix. So it was a very fine, very, very strong book. Very, very strong writing throughout. So then what's missing from this book? Well, there's no Hogsmeade, and it is a shorter read. So if you want the depth of the later books, that's what's missing from this book. You know, obviously later the characters become more mature and developed. So that's all I got from this book. That's all I got that's missing from this book. But if you want a book that's a bit more mature and possibly even richer in detail, check out my number one pick. You know what it is. It is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix coming in at number one. This is the book that got me interested in politics. With everything that was going on at the Ministry, and things really get real in this book. The Ministry is not the safe and benevolent protectorate of the wizarding world that we once knew. Now it's full of corruption and deception. But I loved the scenes of hiding out in Grimmauld Place with the Order, and the kids kind of trying to eavesdrop and overhear what the whispering parents are talking about when they don't want the kids to hear. Just the atmosphere of that is fabulous. It's the longest book in the series. It didn't seem too long to me. I thought the pacing was good throughout. And although it's a dark book with the Ministry and terrible people and politicians involved in the Ministry like Umbridge, we have some light. By contrast, we have Luna, who we meet, Luna Lovegood, who, like her namesake, is all loving and good. What a fabulous character. I like that Ron and Hermione were promoted to prefect. I think that was a really smart move on Dumbledore's part. Even if Harry didn't understand right away, I think he got it pretty quickly. I think he caught on anyway. Professor Umbridge is a very interesting character. She behaves very socially inappropriately from the start at the Great Hall, where she sort of interrupts Dumbledore's speech because she kind of wants the attention of sort of giving this performative recitation that nobody really wanted to hear anyway, to her extreme and severe sadistic tendencies that we see in detentions, for instance. So this all connects, I think, to some of the book's themes of oppression and fairness and punishment. I mean, it's almost laughable. Like, but parts of this book are really extreme and intense. But I mean, a lifetime ban on playing Quidditch. How do you even enforce that? But so she's a terrible character. I would say that she's like almost a cartoon character villain, but sociopathic people on power trips really do exist, especially in high positions of power. In this book, we also get to learn about Snape more through the pensieve. We get the Harry and Cho love story arc, which is actually quite beautifully written with the scene in the room of requirement. I think it was right before Christmas break, standing under the mistletoe, and then she cuts the scene. I think that was a really interesting creative choice that the author made there, because she could have wrote the kiss, but it was, I'm not going to say it was more powerful to cut the scene there and then bring up in the common room where like Hermione and Ron are like, oh, what happened? Oh, did you kiss? I'm not going to say that that was like more powerful, but it was an interesting creative choice, and I appreciate writers making strong choices like that, because it was a good choice. I think it was the right choice for the book. And I love all of the students joining Dumbledore's army, becoming this sort of politically dissident group, and a tragic name too, because they really didn't think that that was going to happen by naming the group Dumbledore's army, that it was actually going to get Dumbledore into big trouble. Oh, and I loved Ginny as the Seeker. Reading that, so remember when everybody from Gryffindor basically got kicked off the Quidditch team, and Ginny was promoted to Seeker, and she was like the only good person on the team because everybody else was. And then they won a game too, didn't they? At that point you knew. I mean, I knew from book 2 that they were destined, but at that point when she was made the Quidditch Seeker, oh, J.K. Rowling, you didn't have to go. You didn't have to say anything else. We all knew, I knew that they were going to be together forever at that point. That was great. I like that. But no book is perfect, and this book is quite a bit dark, severe, and oppressive. So if you're not in that mood, it might not be your number one go-to. Oh, and the Department of Mysteries battle was quite interesting. It was very cool. It was fun to read, but there was no explanation on this archway that Sirius disappears into, and then apparently he dies or is dead, and he's on the other side. I was like, oh, what? Where's the body? I didn't believe he was dead. I was like, I need an explanation, and nobody was giving an explanation. Like, I thought he was going to return in the next book, in book 6 in the series, and no, that's it. He was gone, so that was weird. I wanted a little more explanation. What the heck was happening with this archway that he just disappeared? And where's the body? So we don't get to have a funeral? He disappears? Don't tell me just because he disappears that he's dead. How do you know he's not alive? There should have been some more questions. I would have liked a little more explanation on what was going on with that weird archway thing in the Department of Mysteries. Anyway, that was kind of sad. It wasn't really good closure for me. Harry, it didn't help that like Harry was in denial about the whole thing too, and I was like, okay, then yeah, no, he's definitely probably still alive. They got to go back and get him, but they didn't even try, right? Wasn't it Lupin or something? It was like, oh, he's gone. Harry, he's gone. Anyway. It's a very emotionally intense book, but overall, there's a lot of satisfying moments and important character and narrative developments for the series overall. So these are my top 7 favorite Harry Potter books, and some of the moments that I most enjoy remembering and rereading when I do reread these books. And thank you for joining me on The Media Keeper.